Committee will come to order. Today we're here to consider the Energy Permitting Reform Act. First, I want to thank all of you and your staffs for your hard work on this piece of legislation over the past 2 years. And it wouldn't have happened without your partnership. It wouldn't have happened, I believe, if all of you and your staff had not had the input you've had and the input that we've gotten back, feedback from you all. So I appreciate it immensely. It is also informed by hearings throughout this Congress, and something that we've done too few of. And I think this is a proper way of how we should be doing legislation. We, of course, held briefings specifically on Building American Energy Security Act and the SPUR Act and various other aspects of permitting reform in the last year and a half. But whether focused on permitting or load growth or other energy topics, I think the need for permitting reform has come up in almost every hearing that we've had this Congress. And no matter what side of the fence you may be on, everyone knows it can't happen unless we reform our permitting, how we do things. So time to act is now. Let me be clear, there's no such thing as a perfect bill. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and we've tried everything we could to find that balance. Members on both sides have expressed interest in doing things in other committees' jurisdiction as well. We understand that, and we encourage that. We can only tackle what's in our jurisdiction, and this bill is exactly that. And it significantly moves the ball forward for all types of energy and mineral projects. It's received broad support ranging from the American Clean Power Association to the National Mining Association. I ask unanimous consent to enter almost 80 statements of support into the record. Is there any objection to that? If not, it's approved. We've listened to everyone, and I think that we've hit it right in the middle. Where good, enduring policy that can get through a bipartisan process is made, and it should weather the test of time. Only bipartisanship will do that. It will make meaningful and reasonable changes to ensure that America continues to be the superpower of the world when it comes to both energy production and the emissions reductions. Let me just say this. It speaks volumes to this committee's commitment to good, sensible policy that we've been able to come together on this piece of legislation at a time when our country and politics is so divided. I want to thank Senator Barrasso for being such a good partner, and I look forward to advancing it out of committee today. Without objections, we will also be voting on the nomination of Shannon Estenos to be the Deputy Secretary of the Interior. I think she's well qualified and up to the job, as she showed at her hearing last month. Now, as we head into this tail end of this year, I want to also acknowledge the interest among our members in public lands, forestry, and water bills. We have over 50 already reported and dozens more being worked on as we speak, with at least one markup set for September. So I want to thank you all for your work on those bills. I remain committed to working with Senator Barrasso, members of the committee, and the House to advance the public lands package this year. You all have my commitment on that. So with that, I'll turn to my friend, Senator Barrasso, to give his opening statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding today's business meeting. This morning, we're going to consider S-4753, the Energy Permitting Reform Act of 2024. This is a bipartisan bill that Chairman Manchin and I have negotiated with input from members of this committee over the last year. The bill is a targeted set of consequential reforms within the committee's jurisdiction. It's going to boost American energy and mineral production. It will help lower costs for American families. It will strengthen our economic and national security and the security of our allies around the world. Our bill will guarantee future access to oil and natural gas resources on federal lands and waters. It will permanently end President Biden's reckless ban on new liquefied natural gas exports. It will fix the disastrous Rosemont decision by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. And it will ensure that new transmission lines meaningfully improve electric reliability and actually benefit customers. Our bill includes a series of reforms for onshore oil and gas leasing and permitting. For example, it requires the Secretary of Interior to lease acreage that oil and gas producers actually want. It also eliminates duplicative requirements for federal drilling permits on state and private land. Even a new administration will not be able to enact these reforms under current law. Our bill also mandates at least one oil and gas lease sale in the Gulf of Mexico each year from 2025 through 2029. That's 5 total lease sales. Each sale offers at least 60 million acres. Under existing law, a new administration would only be able to hold 2 lease sales in the next 4 years. Our bill permanently ends President Biden's so-called pause on new American LNG exports. President Biden's pause has been a gift to Russia and Qatar, the world's other leading LNG exports. Our bill requires the Secretary of Energy to act on LNG export applications within 90 days. If the Secretary fails to act, the application would be deemed approved. Our bill also secures access to critical minerals on federal lands. It fixes the Rosemont decision by authorizing mill sites on federal land, whether or not that land has minerals. It eliminates a legal strategy that opponents have pursued for nearly 30 years to block access to minerals on federal lands. Even a new administration would not be able to fix the Rosemont decision under current law. Our electric transmission, I followed 3 principles. First, any changes to existing law must improve electric reliability. Second, any changes must not result in more subsidies. And third, any changes must improve the status quo for states, for electric customers, and for landowners. And I believe our bill fulfills these principles. Our bill eliminates the Secretary of Energy's authority to designate national interest electric transmission corridors. The Secretary's process has become far too political. It is something that Senator Hawley has rightly opposed. In its place, the bill requires a transmission developer to show that the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, in its proposed line meaningfully improves electric reliability. Under current law, the Commission already has broad authority to allocate the costs of new transmission lines. Our bill prohibits the Commission from allocating costs to customers who receive little to no benefit from a new line. It also requires the Commission to consider a specified list of customer benefits that can be quantified and objectively measured. Our bill puts guardrails on the Commission's next rulemaking. FERC staff has already begun developing a rule on interregional transmission planning. Our bill protects the discretion of the 11 existing transmission planning regions. Our bill makes it more likely that neighboring regions will only support lines necessary to improve electric reliability. I want to thank the Chairman and his entire staff for their patience and their perseverance. We would not be here today without their efforts. Our negotiations were not easy. Many points along the way, at many points, it was far from clear that we would ever reach an agreement. And even now, I know members want to do more, especially on hydropower. And you have my commitment that we will keep working on it. Despite the expectations of many, we have put together what I believe is a very strong piece of legislation before us, and for that reason, I encourage all members of the committee to support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Now that we do have a quorum, and we're going to vote on the nomination to be Deputy Secretary of Interior and Shannon Estenos. The question is on the favorability of reporting the nomination of Shannon to be Deputy Secretary of the Interior. The recommendation is the nomination be confirmed. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Manchin.
Aye.
Mr. Wyden.
Aye.
Ms. Cantwell.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Sanders.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Heinrich.
Aye.
Ms. Hirono. Mr. King. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Hickenlooper. Mr. Padilla. Mr. Barrasso.
Aye.
Mr. Risch.
Aye.
Mr. Lee.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Daines. Ms. Murkowski. Mr. Hoven.
No. I'm going to correct first. Lee is, you said no, okay. Did I read it wrong? Okay, Lee is no by proxy. Do we have anything on Hoven?
And Mr. Hoven.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Cassidy.
Aye by proxy.
Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Hawley. On this vote, the ayes are 16 and the noes are 3.
With that, she is accepted and been confirmed.
Mr. Chairman, I ask that my statement on her be admitted to the record.
Absolutely. The objection?
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to note for the record that my no vote on Ms. Estenos is not reflective of the woman that I had an opportunity to meet with in my office. It is absolutely reflective on the fact that I don't believe that under this administration, we're going to see any better policies out of the Department of Interior when it comes to the state of Alaska. And so I can't support her this morning.
Duly noted.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Daines.
so I voted yes. I said my statement, if I could submit it for the record, please.
Absolutely. Without objection. We're going to turn to the Senate Bill 4753, the Energy Permitting Reform Act. Before I do so, I think there's some opening statements people would like to make. If you keep it 2 minutes, it'd be very, very appreciative. We can get to the bill. Senator White.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and colleagues, we made history in 2022 with respect to energy policy. After decades of gridlock debating how to fight climate change, we created a new system built around two principles. The more you reduce carbon, the bigger your tax savings. And the second principle was, going forward, we would have an approach built on technological neutrality. I remember talking with the chairman, we said, you know, who knows what the great innovations are going to be 15 years from now. Let's make sure everybody gets to be part of the future. We'd have all of these technologies out there looking for breakthroughs. This effort that we put in place in 2022 has really paid off. The charts behind me show that hundreds of billions of dollars of investments has been announced in a range of technologies, including a huge increase in clean energy technology manufacturing, critical minerals investment, carbon management investments other than wind and solar are increasing. Investments, these charts show, that have tripled in the past 2 years. This means more American jobs, more clean energy, more security for the American people. Any clean technology can access the credits, any technology, whether it's a technology of today or tomorrow's innovation. I believe this bill has useful provisions in front of it. I very much favor the transmission efforts, and I praise my colleagues. I know Senator Heinrich has had a lot to do with this. We've been working on this for years. They are, by their very nature, technologically neutral. Sometimes when I read some of these provisions, I'd say, why don't we call it a day after the good work on transmission? There are other good provisions, the geothermal ones. I like very much what Senator Cortez Masto and Senator Heinrich have done to update the mining laws so we can start addressing the grisly toxic nature of these abandoned mines. Cleanup fund there is an important start, and I appreciate it. If the bill contained these things, I'd give my support, and I'd recommend a parade down Main Street. Unfortunately, there are a number of provisions in this bill that run contrary to what I think the effort in 2022 was all about, the transformative efforts, and that is why I reluctantly have to oppose the bill in its present form. I hope we're going to make additional changes and we'll start moving in the right direction. So, here are 3 examples of what concerns me, actual provisions that run contrary to what I think a lot of us talked about in 2022. Many of the finance members know about this, the technological neutrality and rewards for reducing carbon emissions. The first concern I have is on page 7. This is on the leases and rights of way. It doubles down on flawed current policies that say agencies can only offer renewable energy projects in conjunction with fossil fuel projects. And in this bill, the industry gets to say where the fossil fuel projects will be offered rather than deferring to agency determination. Doesn't sound very much like technology neutrality to me. The liquefied natural gas provisions allow an export branch hostile to renewable energy to pocket-approve LNG projects in 3 months. That's pipelines and terminals when they're doing nothing. I'm not saying years of project application with no guaranteed result is right, but going from that to 90 days of sitting on their hands and getting a guaranteed yes, sort of like borrowing $5 from a bank, being turned down and showing up the next day to rob it. Third example is on page 5. That's Title I, shortening timelines. Shortening timelines is really a good idea. We're all interested in that. We moved to do some of that in 2015 to have some projects experience that shorter statute. Now we're saying everything is going to be done. So to me, these are 3 examples that basically hold hostage, and I know my colleagues don't mean to do this, they hold hostage the spirit of what we've been working on since 2022. So later on in the day, my colleagues know about this. I'm going to offer an amendment to protect Oregon, Washington, and California because our constituents have codified their interest, which is to have no drilling off the coast, and I hope my colleagues will support it. Senator King has interest with respect to East Coast coasts, and I hope we can work it out, and that will be something we can go through early on. And I finally want to say the chairman and I have been on these issues for a long time. We've often agreed. I certainly agree with much in this bill, particularly the transmission efforts. And what concerns me is examples like the 3 I just cited that I think are walking back some of the reforms we began in 2022. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. And I'll just comment very briefly on this because we want to move on. I know that we've worked for a year and a half, almost 2 years on this. We've had to go up before. We've voted on it, come back. We've improved on it. We've taken everybody's input. The reality is that we're demanding more energy today than ever before. The world is demanding more. There's more people being energized than ever before. And with that being said, every molecule that the United States produces cleaner than any place else in the world, we're replacing dirty molecules that are produced somewhere else. The demand is out there. We're investing more in technology than ever before. No one's ever invested more than the United States of America in new technology. We're just not there yet. 75% of our energy comes from some form of fossil. And that's going to be reducing. We know the transition's coming, but not until we're able to have reliable, dependable energy that's going to replace it. You can't have intermittent basically replacing dispatchable. And once we get there, and we're going to get there, but until we get there, what we're saying is there has to be a balance that we're still producing the energy that's needed for this country. That's what we've worked on here and trying to find that balance, and I appreciate everyone's opinion on that and everyone's decision how they're going to vote. But I can tell you one thing, if you can't move it, and you can't have transmission to move the power that's we're needed to move it, you can forget about everything else. And if it's going to take 10 to 12 years, and the projects, they're basically, the projects that are harmed the most right now are renewable projects. They're the hardest ones getting to be able to move that transmission. They're able to move that electron from point A to point B because we cannot get permits to do it. And we think that we've hit a good balance in this bill to finally be able to do it.
Mr.
Senator Hovind, very quickly, okay?
Yeah, I just like to be recorded as present for the vote on
Without
Secretary
objection.
Estes.
Without objection, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Murkowski.
You may have opened the door here by
Oh, boy.
asking for a little bit of opening statement. I'm going to keep it brief because I think we're going to have some
We're
great.
going to have opening statements.
We're
We'll
gonna-
have closing statements too, so
Right.
if you want to hold it and
And I will be mercifully brief for you. I want to start by just thanking you and the ranking member for what you have done. As one who has sat in that chair with that gavel, it's not easy to stitch together these bills. And so this is not what I would have written. This is going to be incremental gain. I think we recognize that. I'm going to express my extreme disappointment that we haven't been able to do more when it comes to the hydro title. But I think there is a recognition that whether or not you are hell-bent for leather, that we're going to move into this renewable transition yesterday, you've got to have the permitting reforms that this bill takes some baby steps to do. And I think we need to remember that as we go into these discussions, that there's going to be a lot more work that we have to do after that, after this. We don't do things very readily. The last time we had a good hydro provision was the 115th Congress, and it was a darn good title. There's many of you sitting around the back area here who worked on that and know that as much as we had built then, we haven't done more to address the reforms that we need in that side of the equation. So Thank you. I got so much to say. Sorry.
Thank you so much. First, I'm going to lay down the, you've been very kind. First, I'm going to lay down the modified Manchin-Barrasso substitute amendment number 42, to which we've added language from members on both sides. As a substitute, the next is original text for the purpose of amendment. As a housekeeping matter, we will be processing amendments by title. If my colleagues wish to call up an amendment, they'll need to be here to do so in appropriate title. As a reminder, we need a working quorum of 7 members to vote on amendments. We now have at least 7 members present, so we're going to move to consideration of the amendments. Now we're going to move to consideration of amendments. Members would like to raise Title I, Accelerating Claims. Would any members like to be recognized to offer an amendment to Title I?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hirono?
I'd like to call up my amendment number 41. Mr. Chairman, transparency is important in the permitting process, and this is especially true when we are shortening the statute of limitations like this bill does. The legislation before us established a 150-day limit for people to file lawsuits against a final decision by an agency to grant or deny an authorization on an energy or mineral project. But less clear is how we expect people to be aware of the decision and the start of the 150 days to respond. My amendment specifies that the 150-day clock starts to run when agencies publish notice in the Federal Register of their decision. My amendment ensures that all people, not just those that are well-resourced, know about agency decisions. Other important bills, like the FAST Act, includes this requirement. Mr. Chairman, I think we can work together to find a way to improve public transparency in this bill. So while I offer my amendment now to call attention to this need, I will withdraw my amendment. This is an issue of fairness that I hope we will work to address beyond today's markup. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hirono, I commit to you, I'd be happy to work on this moving forward, but until we've thoroughly studied this and spoken with affected agencies, I think that what you've been most considerate about, and I appreciate it very much. Any other amendments to
Chairman?
Title I? Senator Daines.
Chairman, I'd like to call up Daines Amendment 29. I want to thank Senator King and Senator Risch for their support for this. And this amendment ensures that forestry projects under the Healthy Forest Restoration Act are included in this bill's section on accelerating claims. What we're seeing out west is too often projects to reduce hazardous fuels and restore forest health are litigated, which stops essential on-the-ground work. Sadly, multiple proposed project areas have been consumed by wildfires while litigation is making its way through the court system. I'll give you an example. In Montana, most recently, we've got the Horse Gulch Fire. It's currently burning in the footprint of the Forest Service proposed Middleman project that was approved in 2021, but was yet again delayed by litigation, leading to a settlement agreement in April of this year for a downsized treatment area, and now it's on fire. Western forests are in a crisis. If you come out to Montana, it's hard to see the mountains at the moment because of the smoke. Now is the time to save our western forests. Forestry permitted reforms are needed. I urge my colleagues to vote yes.
Thank you, Senator. This amendment would expand the provisions of the bill on judicial review of energy and minerals projects to also include forest restoration projects. As Senator knows, litigation can significantly delay critical forest management projects. However, the Healthy Forest Restoration Act already includes provisions that help to resolve stakeholder objections and expedite judicial review, similar to some of what is included in this bill. So this amendment would likely lead to confusion, but I'm open to working, I really am, working with my colleagues to resolve their concerns on forestry, either in a public lands package or this bill moves to the floor with preferential treatment. So I would hope that you would vote no on this amendment so that we can look at it and get it right.
Mr. Chairman, would you just yield very briefly?
Yes.
I share your view. I think the senator from Montana knows the whole West is burning up now. And so I'd very much like to work with you because I share the chairman's concern that if we don't do this together and thoughtfully, we'll have more confusion and that'll hold up the firefighting efforts. So I want to associate myself with his remarks.
Mr. Chairman, I probably just respectfully disagree with the confusion element, but thanks for that input. But I think this is needed, and I'd like to get a roll call vote on it.
Roll call vote. Roll call is required. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Manchin.
No.
Mr. Wyden. Ms. Cantwell.
No by proxy.
Mr. Sanders.
No by proxy.
Mr. Heinrich. Ms. Hirono.
No by proxy.
Mr. King. I'm sorry, excuse me. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Hickenlooper.
No by proxy.
Mr. Padilla. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Risch. Mr. Lee.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Daines.
Aye.
Ms. Murkowski. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Cassidy.
Aye by proxy.
Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Hawley.
Aye by proxy.
On this vote, the ayes are 12 and the noes are 7.
With that, the amendment passes. Are there any other amendments on Title I? If not, we'll move to Title II, Federal Onshore Energy Leasing and Permitting. Would any members like to be recognized to offer an amendment in Title II?
Mr. Chairman, go ahead, Rich. Okay, Mr. Chairman, in the proposal that you and Senator Barrasso put together, and I do want to commend you on your hard work, we do have a 90-day requirement for approval of a lease for coal mine once the environmental review has been finished, the environmental impact statement's finished and all that. They do have to make a decision on whether to approve or deny that lease in 90 days. That's progress. But then they also need to have their mine plan approved. And so the federal government can sit on that, and sit on that, and sit on that, and sit on that. And that doesn't just affect federal minerals, that affects private individuals and disenfranchises them, as well as the state and other entities that own minerals, because a lot of times these minerals are commingled. So the problem is, though we have the 90 days for them, and this doesn't say you have to approve it or disapprove it, it just says you got to make a decision in 90 days. So we got it on the lease, but we don't have it on the federal mine plan, and really, to be fair, up and down the chain, because it's not just affecting the federal minerals, it affects everybody else, and effectively disenfranchises them when the federal government just sits on it. We need the same 90 days on the mine approval plan. Now, again, you're not telling them they have to say yes or no, but they at least got to make a decision in 90 days. That really needs to be in here, and that's something that I ask that you both work with me at the point we get this to the floor. Because, again, good start, but to have this really make sense, we need to include that piece as well. So I'll withdraw my amendment at this point, but on the basis that I get a commitment that you'll continue to work with me, too, on this issue.
No problem at all. I appreciate it very much, and we do understand. And we'll work through that. It's basically state rights versus over the federal government. I got you.
Exactly. Thank you.
Any other amendments on Title II? If not,
Mr. Chairman,
oh, I'm sorry. Senator Daines?
I want to briefly discuss 4 of my amendments to support some Montana energy issues. This is a broader bipartisan deal, so I'm not going to call them up for a vote, but I think it's important that we address each of these issues as we move forward. First is Daines 40, the Bull Mountains coal mine. This would reinstate the permit for the Bull Mountains coal mine south of Roundup, Montana. This mine is the lifeblood for the local community, and unless we find a solution before the end of the year, the clock is ticking, the mine and all the jobs it provides will be lost. I've introduced 3 bills to keep the mine operating: Senate Bill 4431, 4432, and 4444, the Crow Revenue Act. We simply can't wait any longer. Chairman Manchin and Ranking Member Barrasso, I hope we can work together to get one of these bills signed into law before the end of the year. Second, I have 3 amendments that deal with disastrous rules from the Biden-Harris administration. It's Daines 36, 38, and 39. This administration has been on a rampage in Montana of late. The Biden-Harris Bureau of Land Management recently proposed to stop all coal leasing in eastern Montana and the Powder River Basin. Let me say that again. Stopping all coal leasing in eastern Montana and the Powder River Basin. Montana has more recoverable coal than any state in the United States. The Biden-Harris BLM also finalized new oil and gas leasing rules that dramatically increase costs and bonding for small Montana producers. And finally, the Biden-Harris EPA has pushed through 2 rules, MATS and Clean Power Plan 2.0, which targets Montana's coal strip power plant. All of these rules hurt Montana families. They kill jobs. We need to roll them back. Mr. Chairman, I offer these amendments, but I also withdraw.
Appreciate very much, and I do understand your concern and the cause for the coal jobs and the economies that it supports. I really do, and I appreciate very much, and we will work with you. Any further on Title II?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Rich.
I want to offer amendment number 17, Rich 17, holding the Lava Ridge Wind Project. Look, this committee is well aware of the opposition unanimously by the people of the state of Idaho, except for a handful of people that have a financial interest in this. And the administration continues to press forward, even though this is so wrong on so many levels. For anybody who has even the slightest concern and love for public lands, this thing ought to be off the table. And in any event, I have an amendment that deals with that. I want to associate myself with the remarks of Senator Murkowski regarding the chairman's work on this. Haven't been a chairman myself. I know, as she put it, threads together these kind of bills. I know you're trying to do that with this. You have respectfully asked me to pull this out for a lot of good reasons that you have as far as this bill is concerned. But based on the commitment that you made to me that we'd put this in the public lands bill that we run this September, I'm going to yield to the chairman on this, and I will withdraw this amendment at this time with a commitment that we'll have it in the public lands.
Senator Risch, I appreciate very much, and absolutely, I make a commitment to you that September markup on the public lands package it will be in.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further? It'll be discussed, considered. I mean, it'll be on the markup. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting that.
I'm going to ask for roll call on this one.
Any further Title II? If not,
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry.
one more.
Senator.
And this one I'm going to ask for roll call vote. This is Daines 37. This amendment's simple. Requires the BLM to hold 4 federal oil and gas lease sales in Montana and other top oil and gas producing states. It also requires 2 annual offshore lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico and 2 offshore lease sales in Alaska, which my colleague to the left of me will be grateful for. It further requires that any missed sale must be reheld in the same calendar year. The Biden-Harris administration has done all it can to limit oil and gas in my state and many states, including only holding 2 federal lease sales since they took office. They're supposed to have them quarterly. That means 4 per year. So since the Biden-Harris administration is skirting the law, we're going to make it even more specific. This is pro-jobs, pro-American energy, pro-energy security. I encourage my colleagues to vote yes and ask for a roll call vote, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Our bipartisan bill already mandates 5 offshore oil and gas and wind leases and improves the quality of onshore lease sales offered under the Mineral Leasing Act. We tried our best to strike that balance. The additional sales that was required by this amendment, added to what we've already done, would throw off our carefully crafted balance. I will be voting against the amendment. I encourage my colleagues for the bill that we have worked so hard on to stay intact and be able to move through. I would encourage everyone to vote no. With that, roll call?
Roll call vote, please.
Senator, no, I'm sorry.
Mr.
Senator
Chairman,
Murkowski.
I want to weigh in here. I appreciate what you're trying to do here and the balance that you're seeking to achieve. I am in strong support of Senator Daines' amendment because I think it is important that we not forget that it's this base load energy that we have relied on for so long, that countries around the world continue to rely on. And I'm sitting in a state right now where we have been able to rely on natural gas supplying pretty much 1/2 of the population of the state in the south central area coming out of Cook Inlet. The reserves in Cook Inlet are not as exciting as producers would like them to be, but the reserves are still there. But we are in a place right now where somewhere between the next 18 months and perhaps 2 years, we're talking about rolling brownouts within the South Central region because they cannot guarantee that they will be able to meet the contracts for supply of natural gas into the region. This is not only where Anchorage gets its power, it goes all the way up the rail belt. It's where our military installations seek or get their power. And so the option right now, what is being considered, and in fact, what was just signed off on within just a week or so ago, was millions of dollars to prepare the Cook Inlet, not for a lease sale, not for more opportunities in the Cook Inlet itself, but for us to prepare to import LNG from Canada. Importing LNG from Canada into Alaska for a, quote, short-term fix to supply the majority of the population in the state right now with enough natural gas to keep our lights on and stay warm. For me, this is not acceptable. And I've been pretty tough with our state legislature, with the administration, in saying these are not the solutions that you look for. We don't go to Canada for our gas when we've got gas in the Cook Inlet, we've got gas up north. And gas up north isn't going to come soon enough. But I can guarantee you that if we don't have lease sale opportunities in the Cook Inlet going forward, we're not going to be able to squeeze more out of the inlet to keep the lights on until we can do the modernization of the grid that we're looking for, until we can produce more hydro in the region that we are looking for, until we can bring on more of the marine technologies that we're talking about. What's going to happen? We still have coal there. I don't think any of my friends, maybe Senator Manchin, maybe you all think that we need to go back to coal in Alaska, and quite honestly, that's the discussion that's being had right now. So if we take Cook Inlet oil leasing off the table, we're going backwards. We're going backwards in a way that makes it extraordinarily difficult for a state like mine to advance. So I am in strong support of Senator Daines' amendment here.
Thank you, Senator, and I'm still in strong opposition. So with that, we'll have a roll call vote.
Mr. Manchin.
No.
Mr. Wyden.
No.
Ms. Cantwell.
No by proxy.
Mr. Sanders.
No by proxy.
Mr. Heinrich. Ms. Hirono.
No by proxy.
Mr. King. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Hickenlooper.
No by proxy.
Mr. Padilla. Mr. Barrasso.
Aye.
Mr. Risch.
Aye.
Mr. Lee.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Daines.
Aye.
Ms. Murkowski.
Aye.
Mr. Hoven.
Yes.
Mr. Cassidy.
Aye by proxy.
Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Hawley.
Aye by proxy.
On this, the yeas are 9 and the noes are 10.
Short-lived.
With that, the amendment fails, and
It's fleeting. It's
are there any other Title II amendments? If not, we'll move to Title III.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Senator.
I have Amendment 37. This is the amendment to protect Oregon, Washington, and California from offshore oil drilling in the future.
Is that Amendment 1?
I think it's 37.
We just voted on 37. Your amendment is number 1.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. Amendment 1.
Amendment 1.
Hold on 1 second.
Senator King has a second reading, and he needs to have the vote before the vote.
Right. So should I just talk and yield on to him? Okay. Mr. Chairman,
Senator.
I'll describe this amendment as it relates to the West Coast, and then procedurally, I think we all agree that at that point, I'm going to yield to Senator King because he shares some of the same concerns I have, though he is obviously focused on the East Coast. So the bill raises an issue that is crucial to residents of Oregon, Washington, and California. And it stems from the fact that the legislation before us now requires a set number of offshore oil and gas leases. And we are concerned in our part of the country to avoid even being considered as a destination for more offshore oil drilling. We want to make sure that the will of our constituents, their collective will in opposition to offshore oil drilling, is codified in this legislation. Now, having discussed this with the sponsors, they have assured me that drilling isn't going to happen. Not going to be an issue on the West Coast for those folks who live in Oregon, Washington, and California. And I very much appreciate their goodwill. We've talked a lot about it. But again, much as we tried to do with energy in 2022, when we said the more you reduce carbon, the bigger your tax savings, we're going to have technological neutrality. We've got to embed some of these policies into black letter text. So what I'm doing with my amendment, and I'll let Senator King speak for himself, is writing into black letter law the concerns and priorities of my constituents. And I think I'm very appreciative that Senator Cantwell and Senator Padilla are colleagues who share our interests, because we've worked together on these West Coast-wide kind of issues. And let me at this point yield to my friend from Maine.
Mr. Chairman, I'd have a second-degree amendment to Senator Wyden's amendment. I'd like to call up, the amendment would add the New England Coastal Protection Act, which bans offshore oil and gas development off the New England coast. We have a special interest in this off of the coast of Maine because our coastal economy depends upon our fisheries, particularly lobsters. I was on the coast this past weekend, saw a T-shirt with a lobster on it, and the motto on the back was, "Nobody comes to Maine to eat chicken." and any kind of spill or irregularity of drilling off the New England coast would be catastrophic to our economy beyond the effects of the spill itself. So I call up my amendment, second-degree amendment to Senator Wyden's amendment.
Secondary amendment to Senator Wyden. I will speak to that. And I understand there's no oil and gas development off the coast of New England now, and Senator King is trying to protect that status quo, which I appreciate. There's no interest from industry to lease for oil and gas off the coast of New England, as we understand. But in order to the spirit and integrity of the bill that we've agreed to and worked so hard on, it would be jeopardizing the passage of this piece of legislation. And for that reason, I will be voting against it. Senator.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate what my colleagues have said in that this is an effort to listen to the constituents, basically respond to the will of their concerns. Crucial, I think, was the word that Senator Wyden said. And I understand that, and I guess I would just ask for a little bit of reciprocity when those states that actually want to provide for offshore oil leasing specific to the Cook Inlet, that we should be allowed to do that if it's the will of the constituents. Because I think that's part of our job, is to listen to what our constituents want and work to try to respond to that. So I'm just kind of making my point about Cook Inlet again. I know that it is not, we have not found a path for that, but I just kind of point out that in some areas that the will of the constituents is that they do be allowed to provide for the resource and also to gain the benefit from the jobs. Thank you.
Just very quickly, if I might, Mr. Chairman, I understand my colleagues' Point, as you know, I came to Alaska at your request, and we talked about Cook Inlet. I'm very much interested in continuing that work that we began when I was chair and you were ranking member, and we've worked together on these issues. Message sent, and I'm prepared to work with you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Voice vote or roll call? Roll call vote. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Manchin.
No.
Mr. Wyden.
Aye.
Ms. Cantwell.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Sanders.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Heinrich. Ms. Hirono.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. King. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Hickenlooper.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Padilla. Mr. Barrasso.
No.
Mr. Risch.
No.
Mr. Lee.
No by proxy.
Mr. Daines. Ms. Murkowski. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Cassidy. Mrs. Hyde-Smith.
No by proxy.
Scandal.
No by proxy, by Hoven.
Mrs. Hyde-Smith.
No by proxy.
Mr. Hawley.
No by proxy.
On this vote, the ayes are 9 and the noes are 10.
The amendment fails. With that, we'll move to amendment number 1 from Senator Wyden. Roll call. Is roll call demanded?
All right. Yes.
Yes. You want to say something?
No, let's have a recorded vote.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Manchin.
No.
Mr. Wyden.
Aye.
Ms. Cantwell.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Sanders.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Heinrich. Ms. Hirono.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. King. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Hickenlooper.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Padilla. Mr. Barrasso.
No.
Mr. Risch.
No.
Mr. Lee.
No by proxy.
Mr. Daines. Ms. Murkowski. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Cassidy. Mrs. Hyde-Smith.
No by proxy.
Mr. Hawley.
No by proxy.
On this vote, the yeas are 9 and the noes are 10.
Amendment fails. And with that, we have any other amendments to Title III? If not, we'll move to Title IV, electric transmission. Does any members like to recognize and offer amendment? Title IV? If not, we'll go to Title V, electric reliability. Are there any members wishing to have an amendment on Title V? Without, we'll go to Title VI, liquefied natural gas. Any members like to recognize and offer amendment Title VI?
Mr. Chairman, I have,
Senator King?
yes, amendment number 8. This is really in the nature of a technical amendment. The shot clock for the LNG consideration by the Department of Energy under the proposal, under the bill, begins with the publication of the final EIS. I believe that the date that triggers that should be the FERC issuing a certificate, because FERC may have different conditions and a different approach than the EIS necessarily. It's a matter of when the shot clock commences, and I think it should be the FERC issuing of a certificate rather than the publication of the final EIS. I would, actually, I think what I'd like to do is work with Senator Barrasso on this, have some discussion with his willingness to discuss this with me. I'll withdraw the amendment. Senator Barrasso, is that?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
So I'll withdraw the amendment, Mr.
We appreciate that. We think we can work between FERC and DOE and work something out that makes common sense.
Thank you.
Any further on Title VI? If not, we'll go to Title VII, hydropower. I know we've got some interest here.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Murkowski.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I want to first call up my amendment. I think I'll go to amendment 20. I'm going to go to 23.
If I can make one comment before, because I got to set the stage here on hydropower. Hydro came into this discussion late in the game. So I want to say I strongly support hydropower. I think it's clean, it's dispatchable, baseload source of energy for our grid. I like everything about it. I know there's a lot of desire to do more and permitting, and I agree it's needed. We just got to get the language right. That's all we're asking for. So with that being said,
I'm all over getting the language right, but I want to set the stage here for what we're dealing with. In a state like Alaska, look, we're a coastal state, folks. There's some dispute over whether or not we have 66,000 square miles of coastline or less than that. But we got a lot of coastline, we got a lot of rivers. Right now, we're a community where when you have 83% of your communities that are not connected by road, that means you're not part of anybody's grid, right? So how are these communities being powered? Unfortunately, the vast majority of them are being powered by diesel generators. So in order to keep your lights on, in order to keep warm, you've got a diesel generator, you've got a bulk fuel storage tank that's been sitting there for 20 years that is problematic. So we are looking for everything under the sun to get ourselves off diesel-powered generation. And we're not going to get a natural gas pipeline out to Napaskiak. We're not going to be able to provide enough solar panels in a rainforest community like Angoon. Hydro is going to be our opportunity. And included within hydro is the opportunity with innovative marine energy technologies. And I'm looking to my friend from Maine here because there's a little company in Maine called Ocean Renewable Power Company that we've been partnering with in Alaska for years to try to move forward some of these really exciting technologies with converting potential energy to electrical energy from tides, from waves, from currents and oceans, from the estuaries, the free-flowing water from lakes, the streams, the rivers, the channels. So what I'm introducing here with amendment number 23 is a modernized licensing and pilot licensing process for these types of technologies, as well as a more streamlined pathway to convert a pilot license into a standard license. So why is that important at all? I'm going to share with you the story of the community of Igiugig. You can't spell it. Many people can't pronounce it. There's only 68 people that live there, but it's a beautiful little community. And if you want to talk about sustainability in a hard place where it's tough to sustain things, look at the leadership of what's going on within Igiugig. There's a young native leader, Alexana Salmon. Her last name is kind of indicative of what sustains this little community. So they're all about fish. They're all about fish right there on the Nushkak River. But they decided some years ago, it was actually back in 2014, that they were going to get themselves off of diesel power generation, and they were going to look to harness the power within the river there. And they went to ORPC to test this run-of-river hydrokinetic device. It kind of sits just above the base of the river there, and it's been in river. They had to work it through multiple years because they needed to demonstrate that this was not going to interfere with their food source. And it is an incredibly prolific river when it comes to the salmon producing. So they had to figure out the balance here, and they found it with the RivGen project there in Igiugig. So what does this mean to them to have this technology in their river that's generating power? In 2022, a cost of a gallon of diesel in Igiugig was $10 a gallon. That was in 2022, so I would guesstimate that now it's more than $10. Gasoline was $9.92 per gallon. Electricity was 91 cents a kilowatt hour. How many of your communities can operate today if you're paying 91 cents a kilowatt hour? We give them a little bit of help with what we call PCE from the state, power cost equalization, to help reduce that. With the state's help, we can get it down to 71 cents a kilowatt hour to keep your lights on. It's cold there in the wintertime. It's cold there in the summertime. So what they've been able to do with this device is to save an average of 22,981 gallons of diesel. That's a lot of diesel to save, particularly when you think about how that diesel gets into the community. It comes up by barge once, maybe twice a year. Otherwise, if you run out of diesel, if it's been a long winter, you've got to fly it in, so you're paying so much for this diesel. What they were able to do with the RivGen system, they were able to turn their diesel generators completely off for 275 days. That's amazing. It's amazing. You can turn the generators off so it's quiet. You're not running the diesel generator. It's an incredible opportunity. So you're saving money. The community has benefited. What about the fish? Because that's what I hear from all this time. And I don't mean to be pointing. I know that that's rude, but so often I hear, no, we can't do anything in the rivers. We can't do hydro because of the fish. Well, talk to the original stewards of the land out there who are jealously guarding the health of their fisheries. This is on the Kvichak. I said it was the Nushagak. It's the Kvichak in Bristol Bay. This project alone, they've been able to document over 100 million sockeye salmon smolts and 10 million sockeye salmon adults that have passed by the turbines with no observed injuries or mortalities from hundreds of hours of video monitoring. I can sit here and tell you that the villagers of Igiagik would never, ever, ever allow these devices in their water if it presented a danger to the fisheries and their subsistence way of life. So it's a win-win, right? It's a good story. The fish are thriving, the people are saving money, it's healthier, it's all good. But you still have these technologies that are stifled right out of the gate because we have an antiquated regulatory structure. It's as simple as that. This RivGen device is regulated by the same regulations that apply for traditional hydroelectric facility. So this means that Igiagik, again, a population of 68 people there, smart people, but they've got to file for a FERC relicensing process 5 years in advance of their 10-year pilot license expiration if they want to operate the project past the license expiration and get the long-term commercial license. So what happens if you don't have all these required studies, or you do a long-term plan for commercialization? Or in this case, you're waiting on state resources from the agencies there to complete your resource assessments. So what Igiagik Village Council has to do then, they've got to spend money, they've got to apply to FERC for a 1-year delay to initiate a project relicensing. And you know, it's not only the time, the money that they have in this village shouldn't be spent on regulatory attorneys to file this stuff for this small little project. So I just share with my colleagues, we talk a lot about what we do to care for our indigenous peoples. I'm the ranking member on the Indian Affairs Committee. I get it. We talk about it all the time. Equity for our indigenous communities, environmental justice, and I can assure you there is absolutely nothing equitable about giving our Native communities the choice to be either handcuffed to their diesel generators or spending crazy amounts of money on regulatory attorneys to navigate a licensing and a relicensing that isn't applicable to the technologies that they're being used. So I got lots of Igiagiks in my communities. You have them in yours. You've got innovative marine projects that are going on. They're testing them in Hawaii, New York, Mississippi, Oregon, California, Washington, Maine. They're out there. I got amped up last night, because I get my weekly report from the Alaska Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. It's a SIT report. We all get our situation reports so that we know what disasters are going on. The first thing on the list from July 30th is Napaskiak power outage. Why? Because 2 of their 3 diesel-powered generators are out. So, I mean, this is my reality. Your generator goes out, and so you're just out of luck. Give me an opportunity to take the technologies from smart people all around the country to harness our marine energy resources in a way that's going to help these little communities around a state like mine and in states like yours, where we can do it smarter, but we've got a permitting process that doesn't work for the technologies that we need today. So I sound a little lectury, and I am, because far too often we find these national organizations that are telling us, you can't do this in your community. They don't know these communities. They don't know the situation in these communities and the people who are looking around them at the assets that they have to determine how to help themselves best. Our job is to provide a regulatory process that makes sense, and right now it doesn't. We got a lot of work to do on this, but I feel so strongly that we are handicapping those communities that need these technologies most, and we just say, well, that's the regulatory process of Washington, D.C., and that's not an excuse that I can take to the good people of Igiugig. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator
Chairman.
Heinrich.
Sam, I just want to ask a technical question, which is, does this, the way it's currently drafted, and I assume I'm pointing to page 2, lines 20 through 25, would it apply to run-of-river free-flowing waters, but not apply to any sort of impoundment or dam? So I just want to make sure that what we're doing here is tidal turbines, run-of-river turbines, but not impoundments.
Let me just, if I can jump in real quick, Sam, and Senator Heinrich, and also to Senator Murkowski. I have committed to you all. First of all, we've added Title VII to hydropower, which we didn't start out with in the bill. We know how important it is. Senator Barrasso's staff and our staff has been working diligently on this. We found 3 that we basically have in the bill already, and we're committed to working between now before the bill's put on the floor to see if we can add the other ones you're wanting to get the language correct, which I think we can. And I think we can also answer, hopefully, at Senator Heinrich's, if it's not already answered in there.
Yes, I believe, Senator Heinrich, that it only applies to oceans, estuaries, tidal areas, and free-flowing rivers, which would exclude
Would
dam
exclude
impoundment.
impoundments, right?
Yes.
Make sure we make
That's my
that more
understanding.
definite. We can make sure that's more definite. Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call up Sanders Amendment number 53.
We'll get to that, sir, absolutely. We'll go back to you in 1 second. We just have this one we're still working on right now. Senator Murkowski, Senator King? Do you have a further?
Mr. Chairman, can I weigh in here? We're talking about Amendment 23, is that right? Yeah, I have to say, we need further work on this. I do agree with my colleague, and if we're not going to have the votes today on it, then a commitment that we are going to address this issue and put it on for a hearing and have the opportunity to vote on, because I do think my colleague from Alaska makes reasonable arguments on why we should be looking at this.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. We're totally committed to hydropower and doing everything we could. We really haven't had a hearing on it, which we should have, but we're going to work with and dedicate our time now before this goes to the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I hear the commitments from colleagues, and I don't want to be in a situation where we say, okay, we're going we're going to address these hydropower relicensing things from another time, and then the another time doesn't come. And so I'm looking at heads nodding, and I've had enough conversation with you, Mr. Chairman, as well as staff that have been working this issue for a period of time. I hear the commitment there, but know that this is not one that I'm going to just move beyond this markup and say, well, we'll get to it next year. Just remember, if you're a community that can get 275 days without running your diesel generator to keep your families warm, we need to be doing that more. So I will withdraw amendment number 23 right now with the promise and the commitment that as we move forward this year with legislation out of this committee, that we will work on addressing the process, the permitting process for just these types of technologies that are not only going to make a difference for Alaskan communities, but in communities in your states as well.
Thank you. You have our commitment, both myself and I think Senator Barrasso feels the same, very strongly.
Mr.
Further
Chairman, as someone who used to
24.
work with FERC and file applications and permits, I want to also be involved in this conversation because our regulatory process has to keep track of technology. And the FERC hydro regulations are really dealing with impoundments, dams, fish passage. This is an entirely different case, and I do commend Senator Murkowski for bringing it forward, and look forward to working with you on this.
And we have a 5-member FERC now, and I think we can get this done. Okay? Further? Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call up Sanders Amendment number 53.
Number 53, Sanders Amendment. I think that's in what, Title VI?
Yeah.
Okay. Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It should be no secret to members of this committee, I hope, that climate change is real. It is devastating, causing massive impacts in our own country and around the world, and it is only getting worse. I will tell you, and it's extremely hurtful to me, troublesome to me, that just last night, 2 communities in Vermont, St. Johnsbury and Lindenville, experienced torrential rainfall, massive damage. Last week we had a massive flood. A year ago we had a massive flood. All of this in a way that we have not seen for 100 years. I would hope that at this point every person on this committee understands that climate change is an existential threat to this country and to the planet. And that's not me talking about it. That's what virtually every scientist who studies the issue agrees with. And yet, given all that we know, the United States Congress is still considering legislation to provide a huge giveaway to big oil to drill, produce, and sell more fossil fuels. Just one provision in this bill, Title VI, liquefied natural gas exports, will greenlight 5 massive LNG projects that will lock in annual carbon emissions equal to 165 coal plants. This includes the CP2 LNG terminal in Louisiana, which would be the largest LNG export facility ever built. Don't believe me? Let's look at what Senator Barrasso said when he introduced this bill, and I quote my friend John Barrasso, quote, "We permanently end President Biden's reckless ban on natural gas exports," end of quote. Am I quoting you correctly, Senator Barrasso? All right. Yesterday, more than 360 environmental organizations, 360 environmental organizations wrote to members of this committee urging them to reject this bill. This is what they said, 360 environmental organizations, quote, "This legislation guts bedrock environmental protections, endangers public health, opens up tens of millions of acres of public lands and hundreds of millions of acres of offshore waters to further oil and gas leasing, gives public lands to mining companies, and would de facto rubber stamp gas export projects that harm frontline communities and perpetuate the climate crisis," end of quote. It is my view that we should reject this legislation altogether, but what I am here to do today is to offer an amendment that would strike Title VI, which locks us into carbon emissions equal to 165 coal plants each and every year. For the sake of our kids and future generations, I urge my colleagues to support my amendment and ask for a roll call vote on Sanders Amendment 53. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other discussions on this? If not, I have a statement to make here that I would like to share with you all. I believe that we've identified a reasonable compromise with our bill that provides for decisions based on science and data, not politics. Nothing in the bill requires DOE to approve any specific LNG facility. It sets deadlines for the agency to make a yes or no decision after a multi-year environmental review. Nothing in the bill stops DOE from updating its 5-year-old studies and using newer data to make LNG decisions in the future. Nothing in the bill stops DOE from considering the climate impacts of LNG projects, as is done in the last 3 administrations. And I'll further say this. When the Ukraine war started, we were supplying about 25% of the energy in Europe. After that, we've ramped up LNG exports, cleaner than any place else in the world, to replace the dirty energy that Russia was supplying Europe with, and now we're up to 50% supplying Europe its needs, so they don't have to go back to the Russian oil and gas and their energy that they produce with hardly any oversight on the environment. So for those reasons, I would urge my colleagues to vote against the amendment. Any other comments on this?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator King.
I think I perhaps have been the most outspoken on this committee with regard to LNG exports, principally because of my concern that if exports cross 50% of production, it would have a significant effect on consumer prices here in the U.S. That's been my issue.
That study will be completed by the end of this year. We've been asking for that study.
Well,
We'll finally get
and
it.
as I understand the LNG provisions, the Department of Energy still has to make a finding
Right.
that the project is in the public interest. And part of that would be the study that they're working on now that would involve consumer prices. There's some provisions in this bill, many provisions, major provisions about electric transmission that will be enormously beneficial to the environment, a net benefit in terms of emissions reduced. And we have to have the transmission changes in order to get to a clean energy future. It's a bottleneck, and we're not going to get there otherwise. This bill, in my view, if we vote for this bill, it will get us enormous benefits in terms of emissions and speed the transition. If we vote against it, we will have a slower transition and fewer emissions reductions. But finally, this bill, as I understand it, with the environmentally beneficial provisions with regard to transmission, is a negotiated bill. And I'd like to ask Senator Barrasso, what are the chances of this bill moving without the provisions that you negotiated in terms of LNG and fossil fuels?
Absolutely zero.
Thank you. That was the answer that I expected. And in order to, my view is, in order to gain the enormous benefits of this bill, we're having to take some provisions that I wouldn't have put in the bill, but that's how this process works. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further comments? If not, there's been a request for a roll call vote. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Manchin.
No.
Mr. Wyden.
Aye.
Ms. Cantwell.
No by proxy?
Mr. Sanders.
Aye. Sorry. Cantwell was yes by proxy.
Mr. Heinrich.
Aye.
Ms. Hirono.
Aye by proxy?
Mr. King. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Hickenlooper. Mr. Padilla. Mr. Barrasso.
No.
Mr. Risch.
No.
Mr. Lee.
No by proxy.
Mr. Daines. Ms. Murkowski. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Cassidy.
No by proxy.
Mrs. Hyde-Smith. Mr. Hawley. On this vote, the ayes are 6 and the noes are 13.
Amendment's not accepted. Are there any other on Title VII? We were on Title VII before we went back to Title VI.
Chairman?
Senator Daines.
Title VII item, I'd like to call up Daines Amendment 33. First, let me state, I'm thankful this committee was able to include 2 modest hydro provisions in the bill. But I think if you heard from my colleague from Alaska and myself, I'm disappointed we were not able to include more of our bipartisan.
We're committed to work on it, sir. We're going to get it there.
Hydropower, thank you. Hydropower amendments in the manager's package. Senator Murkowski and I introduced, in fact, 8 amendments related to hydro. You can't have an energy permitting bill without addressing the needs of our vast hydropower fleet. This amendment, Daines 33, is easy. It's got a long history in this very committee. Here's all it does. It simply confirms that hydropower is a renewable resource and updates federal policy to reflect exactly that. Only in Washington, D.C. is it controversial to say that hydropower is renewable. So let me state a very controversial statement here in D.C. Hydropower is renewable. This committee passed similar language in 2015 when my colleague from Alaska was chairman, where many of these members who are present here today voted yes. This is easy, it's non-controversial, it's long overdue. It simply says hydropower is a renewable source of energy. I urge my colleagues to vote yes, and I ask for a roll call vote.
Any further comments on this? My comment will be the same as it was before. We are committed. We put hydro into a Title VII. We're committed to work and do everything we possibly can. We got 3 of the ones that were easier to define. We have a little work to do on these, but we're committed to do it. So I'd ask if we have, you are asking for a roll call on this?
I am, yep.
And I would ask consider to vote no on this so we can get it done right.
And Mr. Chairman, I agree with your statement. We'll join you.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Manchin?
No.
Mr. Wyden? No. Ms. Cantwell?
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Sanders?
No by proxy.
Mr. Heinrich? Ms. Hirono?
No by proxy.
Mr. King? Ms. Cortez Masto? Mr. Hickenlooper? Mr. Padilla? Mr. Barrasso?
No.
Mr. Risch? Mr. Lee?
No by proxy.
Mr. Daines?
Aye.
Ms. Murkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Hoven? Mr. Cassidy?
Aye by proxy.
Mrs. Hyde-Smith?
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Hawley? On this vote, the ayes are 8 and the noes are 11.
Amendment fails.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Murkowski.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to bring up amendment number 25. This is also in the hydro title, and I appreciate what you and the ranking member have said about hydro and the commitment to work on these matters going forward. I thank you for that, and I look forward to that. This is one, though, where we do have a hydro title. There have been several hydro provisions that have been accepted, which I appreciate, as I say. But this is one that, to me, should just really be in the easy bucket. And perhaps if we can have a discussion about why it's complicated right now, I'm happy to listen to that. But let me just share what we're trying to do here. We clarify in our amendment that a licensee is not going to be required to provide prior notification to or obtain approval from the Commission for any non-substantial alteration or addition of project works under the plans that have been approved by the Commission. And they also can't be required to provide the notification if it's routine maintenance, repair, or replacement of a portion of the project that's consistent with a reasonable standard of care for any seasonal or temporary adjustments. So what I'm talking about here is if you do something that doesn't result in a substantial change to the project works plan that has already been approved by the FERC, you're not going to be required to submit a license amendment. If you're conducting routine maintenance work on your project's work, you don't need to file a license amendment and get FERC approval. If you are conducting an activity that does result in substantial change, then this amendment doesn't change anything. You're still required to file a license amendment application as required by the law and the regulation. So we get all that. But what we're seeing in, at least in Alaska, and I think it probably in yours as well, small operators are being forced by FERC to file for license amendments for these routine maintenance and in-kind replacements of equipment. So you've got a cost there, but the cost is also enhanced because you've got these long timelines for FERC approval of these licensing amendments, and time equals cost. So you can't see it from where you are, but you can see the blue line shooting up. What this is these are the non-capacity amendment applications per year, beginning in 2000, going to 2020. So what you have happening is this crazy escalation in the number of non-capacity amendments that are put before FERC. So they have, so this information here comes from FERC's e-library, if you're curious about the math here. But the number of amendments has shot up significantly, and what this then does is it causes longer timelines for the approvals for these very simple amendments. So, I mean, we're not talking about major overhauls. Like a simple project, if you need to replace a power pole, you go back and you get in line for a license amendment. We've lost our way with this process, and the only thing that's impacted is it just keeps getting harder and harder to be a small hydro operator nowadays. So I think what we're trying to do here is kind of bring FERC back to some regulatory sanity, but keep the license amendment process and the procedures to what they're intended for, which is the substantial alterations of the project works plans. So I would just ask, I guess I would ask for an explanation from the chairman as to why this particular amendment, which I think is just so matter-of-fact, matter of course, is problematic, and why we can't address it at this time. And if we can't do that, then I would like real guarantee that we're going to be addressing this
You have my
in the next
guarantee,
one.
which you already do, and as a non-resident of Alaska, I'm as supportive as anyone could be, and if I was a resident of Alaska, I would not have a better advocate than you representing me. With all that being said, we're trying to fix, we know that the severe problems we have in hydro, and that's why we brought it in. I'm told by council that if we took this amendment, it would limit us being able to fix the things we've talked about and committed already, so it needs to be a total package when we fix all of this. That's what I've been told. It could cause us some problems there. So there's nobody with any other consideration in trying to get it all right. Hydro is a big part of this. It came late, that's all I can tell you, and we just haven't had time to run the traps. I don't think we have a problem with FERC. I don't think we have a problem with any of that. We just got to get the language right with them.
Well, Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I'm not saying that it's FERC's problem, but what we have done is we have complicated things so unnecessarily that now things come to FERC, and it's just routine stuff that they've got to sign off on, but there's no reason that they should have to sign off on these types of modifications in the first place. That's the issue. That's our problem. And we haven't addressed it. If this chart is any indication, we have complicated the FERC unnecessarily. We have complicated the activities of our small hydro operators, where we are impeding opportunities on all ends. So I get what you're saying, but I also am afraid that, you know, we're going to wait for the perfect hydro bill.
What they're saying on this right here is that it would basically, the amendment would greatly change FERC's current authority under the Federal Power Act for dam safety and monitoring, which is something that we have to work through and get the language correct, because you're trying to correct another problem and not endanger the oversight they have for the dam safeties. I agree with what you're trying to do there. I just want to make sure that we don't harm another part. And that's all I'm asking for there, is that we're committed to getting it done and getting it done right. So it's going to be in. I mean, it's a privilege that'll go to the floor with this in there once we get it worked out between now and by the time that we do take it to the floor.
I will just say, though, we're not changing FERC's authorities here at all. It's only giving them congressional direction here that they should follow their own process. They shouldn't require these license amendments for these types of really inconsequential changes. So I don't think that this is a situation where we are complicating further FERC. If you look to...
Maybe if I can ask, if
Go
I
ahead.
don't mind, Sam, can you give us how it changes FERC's authority, how this would change FERC's authority?
Well, the amendment does amend both Section 9A and Section 10B and 10C of the Federal Power Act. 9A is the requirement that in order to get a license from FERC, the applicant has to submit maps, plans,
Right.
specification, engineering details. And there's no limitation, and perhaps that's the problem, on the degree of those specifications and maps. But by inserting the word substantial, as the amendment does, that raises a question as to what substantial is. If you move a line on a map by an inch, for example, on an eminent domain transmission siting provision.
Sam, move your mic, if you will.
You could be making some very substantial changes. Moving the line is not substantial. The results on the ground would be. The 10B provision I mentioned, that is the protection of life, safety, and property provision of the Federal Power Act that gives the commission the ability to make sure that once a license has been issued, that the project remains safe. It also encompasses navigation and flood control, which is not in this committee's jurisdiction. That belongs to the Environment Committee. There are implications of changing the words in the Federal Power Act that have been there for 104 years on these issues of life, safety, and property and navigation. And I think what Senator Manchin is saying is that we want to be careful before we start changing those words and removing authority from the commission, that the commission can still protect the public health and safety and interests.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would never argue with Sam Fowler, except...
He was here when they wrote that 104 years ago.
He was. But I will just note that it is FERC's own compliance handbook that shows the path, the process for the decision, and right in the center is whether or not there is substantial modification. And if it's not, then you move forward through the process. So this is at the very heart of their decision matrix in the licensing process. So we're not changing words around here. What we're doing, again, is we're not changing FERC's authority, we're giving them the direction that says, if this is not substantial, move forward. I interrupted the ranking member there.
But no, Senator, you have my commitment to address this issue before we move this bill out to the Senate. I would like to ask Pat to give us some explanations.
Yes.
I would respectfully disagree with my colleague here with respect to this amendment. The statute actually imposes on a licensee the obligation to keep the licensee's facilities safe, and these non-substantial changes in the project. I think the senator had an anecdote from one project about moving a pole. These are things that had traditionally, we understand, had traditionally been done without the need for a submission, and I think the senator pointed to the information from the e-library. So I think what, in our view, what the amendment does is really restore the normal practice that FERC had with respect to making a judgment about when an amendment would be required to be submitted, and would provide, as the senator has said, direction from the Congress, frankly, to go back to that earlier practice.
What I'm trying to do is legislate common sense here.
If I might, the problem that I see in the wording of the amendment is that twice I read the word "notwithstanding any other provision of law," which my colleague, Mr. McCormick, is absolutely right. Under current law, FERC has all those authorities. But when you notwithstand them, you wipe them out. And the language of this amendment controls over what the Commission has been able to do under existing authority. But I think what I'm hearing is that the problem is one of implementation, and maybe the FERC's predecessor, the Federal Power Commission, did nothing for 15 years other than focus on hydroelectric licensing and regulation. And then they were given responsibility over electric transmission, and then they were given responsibility over natural gas pipelines, and all of a sudden, you know, those are the areas that eat up the Commission's time and attention. And as the chairman has indicated, by focusing the committee's attention further on the implementation of these hydroelectric authorities, perhaps we can address these issues without actually taking away necessary authority to protect life, safety, and property and navigation interests.
Mr. Chairman, I get it,
On the time.
and I also, having been there, know that I can read votes going around, and what I'd rather have is a win on this, because it's just, again, to me, it's just so common sense, it just makes sense, and I think I've got the commitment from the chairman and the ranking, and hopefully from smart people on
We
staff.
agree. We just need to fix it, that's all.
I think it's pretty close to fixed.
Okay,
but-
we're going to get it better.
All right. I will withdraw my amendment.
Thank you so much. Alaska should be very, very happy. I would think that Alaska should be elated. Okay. Do we have any other amendments on Title VII? If not, do we have any other amendments that any of our senators still present, so we can get voting on the bill as we have worked it? Any other amendments? Senator Hawley.
Mr. Chairman, would it be possible for me to call up Hawley Amendment number 14? This is in Title IV. I apologize, it's
Title
out of
IV.
order.
Okay, let's go back.
But I'll be very, very fast, very quick.
Go ahead and talk.
This is Section 216, FERC's transmission ability to approve proposed electrical transmission projects. What my amendment would require is that before FERC approves a proposed electrical transmission project, that they participate, that project can be evaluated by the local, regional transmission organizations. In other words, that since state regulators under current law are not going to be able to control the siting of electrical lines, the federal government's going to do that. At least the regional planning process that we require that FERC and participate in the regional planning process to ensure that there aren't regional planning conflicts between these national interest projects
and projects that are approved under the transmission planning, or by the transmission planning organizations. So it's a deconflicting provision, but I will say one that's important to stakeholders in my state. With that, I would ask for the yeas and nays.
Right, and I will just make one comment, if I could, on this. Basically, in 2005, Congress gave FERC the ability to site transmission lines in limited circumstances. In 2021, we updated that law. So this would basically threaten the backstop that we've already put in. So I'd recommend a no.
Well, I share Senator Hawley's concerns, Mr. Chairman. I think his idea has a lot of merit. Senator Lee has an identical proposal. I think we should discuss it further, so I'm just not able to support it today, but I support what he's trying to do here.
Gotcha. Yeas and nays have been required. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Manchin.
No.
Mr. Wyden.
No by proxy.
Ms. Cantwell.
No by proxy.
Mr. Sanders.
No by proxy.
Mr. Heinrich. Ms. Hirono.
No by proxy.
Mr. King. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Hickenlooper. Mr. Padilla. Mr. Barrasso.
No.
Mr. Risch. Mr. Lee.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Daines.
Aye.
Ms. Murkowski. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Cassidy.
Cassidy.
Aye by proxy.
Mrs. Hyde-Smith.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Hawley. On this vote, the ayes are 8 and the noes are 11.
Amendment fails. Any further amendments come before the committee?
Mr. Chairman, this will be quick. I know you want to get this wrapped up. I want to offer and withdraw Daines Amendment 28. So let me just make a statement if I could. This amendment is going to help our utilities deliver electricity to rural customers in a safe, reliable manner. Here's the issue. We need to extend a liability cap for utility rights-of-way, adding language requiring evidence of noncompliance or negligence for claims the Secretary makes above that liability cap, and it creates a categorical exclusion for development and approval of vegetation management, facility inspection, operation maintenance plans for right-of-way to streamline the approval of these plans and the associated routine maintenance. We've got a big problem with some lawsuits and liabilities at the moment, some of our rural co-ops. This gives utilities operating certainty and allow for faster vegetation management along power lines, reducing the risk of wildfire. It's a big problem out west. I just would ask for your commitment, Mr. Chairman, as we look at the forestry package, to include some language here to help our rural co-ops.
Absolutely. We do that. I appreciate very much that. With that, now that we've disposed of all the amendments members would like to call up, we will vote on the modified Manchin-Barrasso substitute amendment. If there are no objections, the committee will vote on the substitute amendment, and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendment is adopted. Having processed all the amendments that have been offered, we now have a quorum of at least 10 members, and we're going to turn to the vote to report the bill. And I want to, first of all, thank each and every one of you all. This is a tough one, and we know that, but something needs to be done, and we've moved the ball on this. And I understand there's the give and take, and everyone has been very respectful of that. And those who we could not agree with today, we made commitments that we're going to fix it. Those that basically did not fit in our jurisdiction, we appreciate working with the jurisdiction of committees that they can fix the things that you have concerns about. But with that being said, I can tell you this is going to be a tremendous asset for our country to be able to meet the needs that we have for the energy that we desire today and the energy that we wish for tomorrow. That's what we're working towards.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a very strong bill. I encourage all members to vote in favor of it, and I do have a statement by Senator Hyde-Smith that I ask unanimous consent to be included.
Without objection. With that, the question on reporting the bill is Senate Bill 4753 as amended. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Manchin.
Aye.
Mr. Wyden.
No by proxy.
Ms. Cantwell.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Sanders.
No by proxy.
Mr. Heinrich. Ms. Hirono.
No by proxy.
Mr. King. Ms. Cortez Masto. Mr. Hickenlooper. Mr. Padilla. Mr. Barrasso.
Aye.
Mr. Risch. Mr. Lee.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Daines.
Aye.
Ms. Murkowski.
Aye.
Mr. Hoven.
Aye.
Mr. Cassidy.
Aye by proxy.
Mrs. Hyde-Smith,
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Hawley, on this vote, the ayes are 15 and the noes are 4.
Mr. Chairman,
Chair?
I'd like to submit a statement
Senator,
for the record after the hearing.
without objection.
Thank you.
I just have to go preside, but I did want to say how much I appreciate all the work that you and Senator Barrasso put into this.
Well, it was everybody. It was just.
Well, everybody, it's a team effort, I realize that, but you guys led the team and kept the process moving. The red tape, the outdated processes are getting in the way of economic growth, and especially this transition to clean energy future. This is not a perfect bill. There's parts of this bill I don't like. I think that's true of my Republican colleagues. But we've got to continue moving in this with a greater sense of urgency towards a clean energy future. So it's a compromise bill. I am so glad for your work, and you know, it's a compromise that I think we can all look forward to and vote for with pride. Thank you.
Let me just say this. First of all, the motion is agreed to and the bill's minute is ordered passed, and thank you all, thank you.
Mr.
With
Chairman,
that,
Mr. Chairman.
we have Senator Padilla first, and then I got Senator Heinrich. I'll come right to you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. As you and I have discussed, and many of us have shared publicly, in order to meet our climate goals and ensure a reliable and safe electrical grid, we must truly build a historic amount of renewable energy and the transmission infrastructure to support it. So I particularly want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Barrasso, for your attention on some of the issues of critical importance, not just to me, but to the state of California. These provisions will be instrumental in meeting our clean energy goals, and of course, they include reconductoring and energy storage, upgrades to existing energy infrastructure, offshore wind transmission, and geothermal energy. So again, I thank you and your staff, you were the team leaders here, for your work over the past week to, in particular, improve the Department of Interior's ability to permit renewables on public lands, offshore wind provisions, and FERC staffing and security. We didn't talk about it much, but that's also critical in this effort. The manager's amendment makes some important progress on these issues. But I did want to register some concerns as this goes to the floor and we await action by the full Senate. Some of the provisions in this bill that I understand were necessary to strike that bipartisan compromise here today, specifically related to LNG exports and fossil fuel leasing. Mr. Chairman, I also spoke to you directly about the feedback I've gotten over the bill's 150-day statute of limitations for mining and energy projects. I believe it's unreasonably short and could actually incentivize more litigation if stakeholders all of a sudden feel incentivized to file placeholder lawsuits in order to buy more time to actually review the decisions. Mr. Chairman, as you know, I'm also a member of the Environment and Public Works Committee, and I want to point out that in the bipartisan infrastructural law, we permanently reauthorized FAST 41, which includes a 2-year statute of limitations for covered projects, down from the 6 years. So there, it was down from 6 to 2 years. Here, we're going 6 years to 150 days. In that effort, it also included other transparency and efficiency measures that aren't included in this bill either. So I hope that we look to that model for consideration in this package. And I feel confident in saying this because I've heard colleagues on both sides of the aisle point to the 2-year timeline in FAST 41 as reasonable. And in some cases, the term gold standard was used for permitting projects. In fact, the BLM recently approved construction of the Desert Quartzsite Solar Project in California, a successful FAST 41 project to construct a 450-megawatt solar facility and a 3-mile-long transmission line in the California desert. So it can and does work. I know, Mr. Chairman, that these are hard issues, and I'm proud to have supported this package here today because we simply cannot meet our clean energy goals without permitting reform. It's been a big priority for you. Happy to be a part, but I hope that we continue working and negotiating the provisions of the bill, particularly the guardrails around projects deemed in the national interest, clarifying the interregional transmission planning section, and taking a second look at the timelines, transparency, and efficiency measures, because it's imperative that we get this right. Thank you, Mr.
Before I turn to Senator Heinrich, I want to say to the staffs and recognize them have been working around the clock. They really have. We have on Senator Barrasso's staff, we have Justin, Tripp, Pat, Valerie, and James. And on our staff, we have CJ, we have Renee, CJ, Daniel, Chris, Charlie, Sarah, and Sam. They've been doing yeoman's work and working with all of your staff, so I thank them. Senator Heinrich, for your statement.
Thank you. And I just want to echo the thanks of you, Chairman Manchin, and Ranking Member Barrasso on this. This was a carefully crafted, bipartisan, balanced bill. And so all of us have things we love about it, and we also have a few things that we're not crazy about, but that's how legislation works. In New Mexico, for a little context, we're currently building a major regional transmission line. It's 550 miles long across Arizona and New Mexico. It's a $20 billion impact to the economy, but it took us 17 years to get there. We have to be able to get to yes or to get to no in a lot shorter time frame if we're going to address the climate crisis that Senator Padilla brought up. And America just frankly needs to be able to build big things again. There are some things in this that will increase emissions. You know, the oil and gas provisions will likely increase emissions on a scale of less than 160 million tons of CO2. It's good to put that in perspective, because the reductions in emissions because of the transmission and geothermal and other portions of this are going to reduce emissions by 2 to 3 billion, not million with an M, billion with a B, metric tons of CO2. This puts us on a much faster path to addressing the things that are causing drought and forest fires and all kinds of stress across the country, and especially in the West. So I thought it was important to put that into context. I also want to say how much I appreciate Senator Murkowski's willingness and patience, because some of these are common sense provisions, and we can nail down the details and should nail down the details on things like run-of-river hydro. I want to make sure that, you know, if the Forest Service or the BLM is the agency that manages the land around those rivers, that they're involved in that FERC process, but I think we can get there on that. I think small hydro maintenance is another area we absolutely need to, the FERC has a lot of things to do. They don't need to be approving amendments for very minor maintenance. So we'll look forward to working with you on that, and thank you for your advocacy, Senator Murkowski.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to my colleague, Senator Heinrich, for that. I look forward to working with you on these as well. I appreciate where we are today with having advanced a product out of the committee. I think it's important that we demonstrate some forward movement on permitting reform. And while this isn't the end-all and be-all, as we've all acknowledged, it starts moving us forward. I truly appreciate the commitment from both the chairman and the ranking to work with me and others on these hydro provisions. This is a part of our energy portfolio that I think we kind of take for granted. We take for granted because it's been in place in so many parts of the country for so long. We just forget about it. We forget about the value that this extraordinary baseload renewable energy source, what it provides to us. But we have, our own processes have complicated our ability to do right by this resource. So whether it's big hydro and relicensing, or what I'm talking about with the small hydro, the run-of-river projects, the marine energy technologies that will allow communities like Igiagik and Napaskiak to get off of diesel power generation, this is what we want to work on. And the good news for you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member, is I got a bill ready for you already. I had it prepared. I had it prepared as an amendment to this package. We chose not to introduce it today, but it's one that you've seen before. We introduced it. We worked with many of you in the 115th Congress. We think it is a good path forward. It's a good template, and we want to spend a little bit of energy working with you. And I'm going to invite any of you to come up to my state to see some of what we're trying to do with some of these smaller scale projects. You'll get as excited about it as I am, and you'll want to help. So thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad that we had a successful markup.
Well, let me just say as we wrap up that this has been a tremendous day for all of us, and I appreciate all of you and all the hard work. And truly, from the committee and the staff members, it's just unbelievable. This was truly a overwhelming bipartisan vote of 15-4. A lot of times we see things come out on party line votes. This is not party line. This is everything that's needed in this country to make sure that we're able to deliver dependable, reliable, and affordable energy in the cleanest fashion possible, realizing that we have to have dispatchable power now, but also realize that we're investing and we have to bring forward a transmission to basically move those electrons in the cleanest fashion with renewables. So we're doing everything we can to have a balanced approach. And I thank you all. This concludes our business for today, and the committee is adjourned.